In the world of giants and titans, some legacies are forged in fire, celebrated with ticker tape, and immortalized in halls of fame. But others are buried, erased, intentionally forgotten. This is the story of one such legacy. A story of a woman who was more than a champion. She was a phenomenon. They called her Elara, the Eclipse, because when she entered the ring, she blocked out everything else. Her skill was undeniable. Her connection with the crowd, electric. She was on a trajectory aimed at the stars, poised to redefine an entire generation of the sport. But just as quickly as she rose, she vanished. There was no farewell tour, no final match. Just a cold, sterile press release mentioning a breach of contract. The whispers backstage told a different story. A story of defiance against a powerful executive, a man named Marcus Thorne, who saw her not as a star, but as a threat to his control. Thorne didn't just fire her, he scrubbed her from history. Her matches were pulled from the archives, her name chiseled off championship plaques, her very existence relegated to a footnote that the company tried desperately to make the world forget. For 5 years, it worked. A new generation of fans barely knew her name. The machine moved on, as it always does. She was banned, forgotten, erased from every storyline. Then, live on national TV, during the industry's biggest night, something no one saw coming happened. The crowd's reaction? Pure chaos. This is the comeback that silenced every critic. The main event had just concluded. Confetti rained down on Thorne's hand-picked champion, a corporate-approved titan with perfect hair and a soulless smile. Marcus Thorne himself stood at ringside, clapping with the self-satisfied air of a king surveying his kingdom. The broadcast was seconds away from going off the air. The commentators were wrapping up, reciting their scripted sign-offs. It was a perfect, predictable ending to a perfect, predictable show. And then, the world stopped. The arena lights snapped off, plunging 20,000 people into absolute darkness. A collective gasp, followed by a confused murmur, rippled through the crowd. It wasn't a power failure. The emergency lights remained off, a deliberate, suffocating blackness. For 10 long seconds, there was only the sound of breathing. Then, a single, haunting chord echoed through the speakers, a sound no one had heard in half a decade. It was the opening note of Elara's theme music. A disbelieving roar started in the front row and spread like a wildfire. Phones shot up, their tiny lights piercing the darkness like a new constellation. When the main spotlight finally flickered back on, it wasn't on the champion or on Thorne. It was fixed on the entrance ramp, and there she was, Elara. Not in wrestling gear, but in a simple black coat, her face older, etched with a quiet resolve that was more intimidating than any war paint. She didn't march, she didn't pose. She just walked, slowly, deliberately, her eyes locked on the one man who thought he had destroyed her. The champion in the ring, a puppet king without his strings, looked utterly lost. He glanced from Elara to Thorne, his manufactured confidence melting away into raw, genuine confusion. But no one was looking at him. Every eye, every camera, every soul in that building was fixed on the ghost who had returned to haunt the machine. The commentary team was silent. Their teleprompters were blank, their producers screaming indecipherable commands into their headsets. For the first time in years, the slick, corporate broadcast had no idea what to do. The director in the production truck made a split-second decision. He held the shot. He let the world watch. Elara reached the bottom of the ramp and stopped. She was 20 feet from Marcus Thorne, who stood frozen, his plastic smile now a mask of disbelief and fury. She didn't raise a fist. She didn't grab a microphone. She simply stood there, a silent statue of defiance, and let the noise of the crowd speak for her. The roar was deafening, a primal scream of vindication from thousands of people who had been told to forget. It was a sound of rebellion. Backstage, Chaos erupted. Wrestlers poured out of the locker rooms, crowding around the monitors. Security guards scrambled, unsure of their orders. Was this part of the show? Or was this something real, something dangerous? The broadcast feed suddenly cut to black, replaced by the network's logo. But it was too late. The image was burned into millions of minds. A forgotten queen, a terrified king, and a world holding its breath. In the minutes that followed the abrupt end of the broadcast, the internet did what it does best. It exploded. The words, "Elara is back," trended worldwide in under 60 seconds. The grainy cell phone footage of her silent stare-down was everywhere, replayed millions of times before the company's official channels could even post their "Thanks for watching" graphic. Every wrestling podcast, news site, and YouTube channel immediately went live, speculating wildly. Was she signed? Was it a rogue appearance? A publicity stunt? Or was it the opening shot in a war no one knew was being waged? The official story from the company came 3 hours later. A carefully worded statement from Marcus Thorne's PR department. They called it a deplorable security breach and a sad attempt by a disgruntled former contractor to grab the spotlight. They announced a full investigation and assured fans that such a disruption would never happen again. They were trying to frame her as an outsider, an unhinged trespasser, but nobody bought it. The narrative was no longer Thorne's to control. The fans saw something else. They saw the look on his face, not of a man dealing with a security issue, but of a tyrant seeing his own ghost. They saw the way the champion shrank in her presence. They saw the raw, unscripted emotion of the crowd. The company said it was a security breach, but the world saw it as a reckoning. Behind the curtain, the atmosphere was a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Marcus Thorne was reportedly in a rage, throwing furniture in his private office, demanding to know how his security had failed so spectacularly. He wanted Elara arrested, sued, and banished all over again, but this time, for good. His legal team advised caution. An arrest would turn her into a martyr. A lawsuit would involve public discovery, and Thorne's past dealings were not something that could withstand that kind of scrutiny. The network executives were calling, and they weren't angry. They were intrigued. The overnight ratings for the pay-per-view were astronomical, with the final, chaotic minute pulling in more viewers than any main event in the last decade. Sponsors who had been on the fence about renewing their deals were suddenly very interested. Thorne was trapped. His business instincts were at war with his personal vendetta. He had built an empire on predictable, controlled entertainment, and this woman had just introduced a variable he couldn't solve. The locker room was just as divided. The older guard, those who remembered Elara, were quietly celebrating. They knew her story, knew the injustice she had suffered. The younger talent, those who had grown up in Thorne's system, were nervous. They saw her not as a savior, but as a disruption to the order that guaranteed their paychecks. The battle for the soul of the company had begun, not in the ring, but in the hushed, anxious conversations taking place in the corridors of power. While the world debated her motives, Elara herself remained silent. She disappeared as quickly as she had arrived, slipping out of the arena before the press could corner her. She didn't release a statement, didn't appear on a podcast, didn't post a single cryptic tweet. Her silence was her greatest weapon. It created a vacuum that the world rushed to fill with their own stories, their own hopes. But where had she been for 5 years? The truth was far from the dramatic narratives being spun online. She hadn't been plotting a vengeful return. She had been healing. After being unceremoniously discarded by the industry she loved, she returned to her family's home in the quiet countryside. She disconnected from the world of wrestling, refusing to watch the product that had betrayed her. She trained, not for a comeback, but for herself. In a dusty old-school gym her father had built behind their house, she honed her craft, pushing her body and mind to their limits, free from the pressure of television cameras and corporate mandates. She rediscovered her love for the art of wrestling, not the business of it. Her exile wasn't a prison, it was a sanctuary. It allowed her to strip away the character of the eclipse, and find Alara Vance again. She wasn't a broken performer licking her wounds. She was a master artisan, perfecting her art in solitude, waiting for the right moment, not to reclaim her past, but to define her future. Alara's father, a respected wrestler from a previous era known simply as the Vanguard, had watched his daughter's public execution with a heavy heart. He had warned her about men like Marcus Thorne, men who saw wrestlers not as people, but as assets to be exploited and discarded. When she returned home, he didn't say, "I told you so." He simply opened the door to his gym and told her, "The ring is still here for you, if you want it." For 5 years, he was her confidant, her trainer, and her moral compass. He watched her rebuild herself, not with bitterness, but with a quiet, unshakable dignity that reminded him of the legends of his time. When she told him her plan, to walk out on that stage, to face Thorne without saying a word, he was afraid for her. He knew the risks, the power Thorne wielded. But he also saw the look in her eyes. It wasn't about revenge. It was about honor. It was about reminding the world, and Thorne himself, that some things can't be bought or buried. After her appearance, her family's small farmhouse was besieged by reporters. Her father politely declined every interview request, but one local journalist caught him walking out to his mailbox and asked if he was proud. The old man paused, looked at the horizon, and said something that would be quoted everywhere. "Pride is for victories. What my daughter did, that was about truth, and the truth doesn't need a trophy." In the weeks that followed, the company tried to get back to business as usual. They pushed their new storylines, promoted their next event, and made a point of never, ever mentioning Alara's name on their programming. But they had forgotten one crucial thing: the audience. The fans refused to move on. At every live event, in every city, a new ritual began. During the main event, a low hum would start in the upper decks and grow into a deafening, unified chant, "Alara, Alara!" It was a weekly referendum on Thorne's authority, a mass protest happening on his own airtime. When the company tried to edit the chants out of the broadcast, fans would post the raw audio online, exposing the censorship. When security tried to confiscate signs bearing her name, 100 more would pop up in their place. An entire cottage industry of unofficial merchandise appeared online. T-shirts with her silhouette, the date of her return, and a simple, powerful word: unerased. Thorne was losing the one thing he could never afford to lose: control of his own audience. He was putting on a puppet show, but the entire crowd was looking over his shoulder at the ghost standing in the wings. His perfectly constructed universe was being dismantled by a memory. The demand wasn't just for a wrestler to return. It was a demand for a story to be corrected, for a history to be rewritten. The pressure was becoming unbearable. Ratings were stagnating, because while the intrigue around Alara was high, the on-screen product felt hollow without acknowledging her. Sponsors were asking questions. The board of directors was getting nervous. Marcus Thorne, the man who prided himself on being a master manipulator, had been outmaneuvered. He was left with only two options: continue to ignore the tidal wave and risk his entire empire being swept away, or face it head-on. He chose the latter. On his flagship television show, he finally did the unthinkable. He said her name. He walked to the middle of the ring, his face a carefully constructed mask of corporate solemnity. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He spoke in the calm, condescending tone of a disappointed father. He acknowledged the disruption and the misguided sentiment from the fans. He painted Alara as a troubled soul, a brilliant talent who let her ego destroy her career. And then, he laid the trap. He invited her to the ring the following week. Not for a fight, but for a public forum. A chance for her to air her grievances and for him to set the record straight. It was a classic Thorne power play. Seize control of the chaos, frame the narrative, and do it all in his arena, on his terms. He believed that by giving her a microphone, he could expose her as just another bitter ex-employee. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. The night of the public forum arrived, and the anticipation was palpable. The broadcast opened with a shot of the sold-out arena, a sea of signs and expectant faces. Marcus Thorne was already in the ring, flanked by security, a smug look on his face. He delivered a long, meandering speech about corporate responsibility and second chances, setting himself up as a benevolent leader willing to hear out a former subordinate. Then her music hit. The crowd erupted. Elara walked to the ring with the same quiet intensity as before. She stepped through the ropes, took the microphone handed to her, and stood face to face with the man who had tried to erase her. The world waited for the explosion, for the accusations, for the laundry list of injustices. Thorne smirked, ready for the fight. But Elara didn't give it to him. She looked past him, making eye contact with the camera, speaking not to him, but to everyone watching. "He wants you to believe this is about me," she began, her voice steady and clear. "He wants you to believe this is about a contract, about money, about a job I lost. He is hoping I will scream and yell, and you will all dismiss me as hysterical. He wants a fight. I am not here to fight him." She turned her gaze to Thorne, whose smirk had now vanished. "I am not here for a match," she continued. "I am not here to ask for my job back. I am here to ask a question, to all of you. What is this sport truly about? Is it about profit margins and branding?" Elara asked, her voice resonating through the arena. "Is it about who can be molded and controlled? Or is it about the moment a story becomes so real, you forget you're watching a show? Is it about the legacy passed down from a father to a daughter? About the honor in this ring that no contract can define and no man can erase?" She never raised her voice. She never named his specific crimes. She didn't need to. By refusing to engage in his petty personal battle, she elevated the conversation. She wasn't fighting for herself. She was fighting for the soul of the entire industry. This wasn't a comeback for a championship. It was a comeback for an idea. Thorne stood there, speechless. He had prepared for a brawl, not a sermon. He had no response. The crowd was silent, hanging on her every word. Elara placed the microphone gently in the center of the ring. "My story is finished," she said softly, before turning and walking away, leaving Thorne alone in the spotlight with the weight of her words. That was the twist. Her return was never about wrestling again. It was a checkmate, a single, perfectly executed move to expose the king. In the months that followed, Thorne's empire crumbled. An internal investigation, spurred by her speech, uncovered years of corruption. He was forced to resign. The company was restructured. Elara never wrestled another match. She didn't have to. The lesson was clear. A true comeback isn't always about re-entering the ring. Sometimes it's about reminding everyone what the ring was for in the first place. And sometimes the loudest statement you can make is the one that silences everyone else.